MarsCon chair this year, and will be again next year. So if you like things, tell me. If you don't like things, also tell me, but please be nice about it. Welcome, Christopher Ruocchio, for our artist guest of honor. And I also appreciate you all coming for this type of panel, because I don't think MarsCon has really done this kind of panel in the past, and I think it's a good idea, but who am I? So the first thing I will say is I've been saying your name wrong for an entire year.
Well, that's okay. Most people do. I'm like so used to it.
And but I also did it so I could spell it properly.
How are you saying it? I'm just curious.
Ruocchio.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep. Yeah. My poor wife was a Perry before we got married. How do you do this? I'm like, every day. You know, it's fine. You know. I owe a lot. There's a YouTuber who's also an author, Brian Lee Durfee, who did a review of my first book, and he said my name very dramatically at the beginning, and it became a little bit of a meme, which has saved me an enormous amount of having to tell people how to say my name. I owe Brian probably several hours of my life at this point. So thanks, Brian. Wait. Rocky.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, we got a door closed and everything. All right, so, first question. Have you always been a writer?
More or less, yes. I knew I wanted to write stories when I was about 8. My friends and I would play like make believe at recess, and it started out as like them being Dragon Ball Z characters, and I was Batman because I was not allowed to watch Dragon Ball Z. So they had to decide if that was allowed. But that grew into like we would just make up stuff, right, as kids, and like we would keep track of this increasingly silly world that we created. But then they all like grew up, and I didn't. They would go just they developed social skills and played sports, and I just kept writing. So all my like middle school notebooks are like half math, half nonsense, or the other way around. And so I would just keep sort of doing this, and I didn't really know where I was going with that because I thought you'd be old to write books. But obviously I realized that was not ultimately true. I got to college and decided I was going to like sort of move that direction. Got an English degree and wanted to have a novel by the time I was done. And have an agent, preferably. And I managed to do that. I got an agent about a month before I graduated, which was graduated December 2015 from NC State. And January, the next year, I had sold the book to Daw Books, and the same week, my internship at Bain Books turned into a job, and so I was working for my publisher's competition and vice versa for a long time, but which was a little weird. Everyone was cool about it. But I'd always known that was really going to be my thing. I got very stressful there towards the end of that last year in college because I didn't have a backup plan. An English degree is kind of a dicey prospect, really. So it was like, ooh, more waiting tables. We'll see how it goes. Thank heavens it's not how it worked out. Not that there's anything wrong with waiting tables. I actually miss that sometimes. But yeah, this was always the plan. Which seems to have worked somehow.
Has science fiction always been the plan?
No, fantasy really was like my first love. I was the right age to be like the youngest kid to read Harry Potter as it was coming out. And the natural sort of progression from that was into Lord of the Rings right around the time the movies hit. And my parents bought me the audio CDs of Lord of the Rings. At first they bought me the abridged ones, and once I learned the word abridged meant I was real mad. So I had those old Rob Regalis recordings of Lord of the Rings, which was like 100 discs or something. And I listened to those on loop. I like destroyed them over the course of several years. I would fall asleep listening to that recording. I must have listened to Lord of the Rings 100+ times in my life, and that's like not hyperbole. And because audiobooks were expensive when you're buying 100 discs, like that was it, right? And I got the audio because like it was a little bit above my reading, right? But listening to it, like if you're listening to something, it really brings the comprehension level down, actually, right? So like that means because it doesn't matter if you didn't get like that one sentence. You know what the next thing is? It's all moving. It's fine. right? And so, so I would do that, and then, you know, I would read alongside. But I knew I wanted to write a fantasy story, and it turned into a science fiction story sort of along the way. When I was in ninth grade, I went to, I don't know if you have it in Virginia, I went to what we call magnet school. I don't know how far this goes. Sometimes I'll talk to people like, what are you talking about? And they had a science fiction literature class that was taught by like a con-going fan, right? So I got to read Van Vogt, we read C.L. Moore, we read Lee Brackett, and a bunch of writers that like most of my fellow millennials were like, ooh. And so I have the like sort of reading history of a much older fan, and so somewhere I think in that and from that I transitioned into science fiction, but not 100%. The Sun Eater I still think has a quarter turn towards fantasy in a lot of ways. And in a certain sense, I think they're kind of, I don't think they're different genres. I think that the sort of, I think the conventions of world building, right, are basically the same, right? It's, especially now, right, if magic is something we're systematizing and thinking about in these very material terms, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it's not that different than coming up with, like, weird technology, right? You're increasingly converging these two things. But I do think, like, it's a difference between a Vulcan and an elf. It's not very clear. You know, so, you know, I don't really know that there's a sharp line between those things in the first place, and I try to keep my feet in either camp.
When you were making that switch, or even now, do the magic system versus technology system, I understand and agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
A lot of times, though, in my readings of fantasy versus science fiction, major themes are different. And so, is that part of what might have pushed you more into sci-fi over fantasy? Is that different emphasis on those themes?
It would depend on the theme, maybe. So when I'm talking about examples that might help me narrow it down, because I think really, in terms of theme, it's maybe one of the places where my writing more resembles fantasy. Because I'm interested less in questions of like, how does this technology impact X, Y, or Z, than I am in questions about like, who are we, right? And like, what is a hero? And questions that I think are more closely associated with fantasy, right? Because if there is a difference, right, it's pretty simply in the fact that fantasy is in a lot of ways more backwards looking, right? If it's epic fantasy, it's usually based on a time and culture past, right? If it's urban fantasy, it's still pulling on the cultures and traditions past, right? Even if it's set now, right? It's like, oh, it's Chicago, but we're dealing with Celtic mythology, right? Whatever. And science fiction is, by its nature, sort of forward-looking, right? But the past and the future are intimately connected. In the present, for starters, right? But period. You know, tomorrow, what happens tomorrow is informed by what you did yesterday, right? And that's true over thousands of years. And so I don't necessarily know that the genres are separated, even thematically, except by common practice. Right? And so my world building, for example, a lot of science fiction you'll see worlds where today everything that we know has been completely forgotten. You know, I love Dune, but there's so little stuff from now in the future of Dune that I found it implausible. Right? It's like I talked about this on the chaplain on the Enterprise panel yesterday. Right? All the stuff's really old. We like put museums. And we protect and we look for more of, and we tell people about it, right? You know, I showed hands yesterday. I was like, who's heard of Gilgamesh, right? Who's heard of Gilgamesh, right? Hands, you know? Right, exactly, right? It's like literally the oldest story we have. You know, it turns out like we care about that. And I don't see that would change over 20,000 years, right? And so I wanted to talk about a future that's deeply rooted in our past, and in which those things from our past are even more important because they still happen. And so maybe that makes the universe feel older in my writing, but also maybe it makes it feel more like a fantasy because it feels older. You know, so I think in terms of theme, especially, I may feel more like a fantasy writer. But then the science fiction writers I really like are like that. I love Frank Herbert, obviously we talked about Tune already, but my favorite science fiction writer is Gene Wolfe. And Gene Wolfe, one is a genius, but he's also a writer that's like deeply interested in fairy tales and tradition and history and all these things, right? And it's not that he's not interested in technology and all that stuff, but there's this extra level to it that I think other writers might overlook. So yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. The point of this is also to have questions from you as attendees to.
What's your favorite Gene Wolfe story?
Story or
Well,
or,
yeah, I mean, there's Shadow of the Torture a little.
Sure. Obviously, it's the solar cycle. Yeah. My favorite short story though is Trip Trap, which if anyone hasn't read it, is great. But it's about essentially a Starfleet officer and a medieval knight, where the medieval knight is an alien from this planet the Starfleet officer is visiting, and together they go fight a troll that lives under a bridge. But it's written from both of their perspectives, sort of at the same time. It goes back and forth, and so you see this episode from the perspective of this human from Earth, right, circa 2800 or something, and this medievalish alien, and their perspective on what this troll is very different, and their perspective on each other and all this stuff. Wolfe is really the master of getting inside of his character's head, and he's really, really good at doing that in first person. I hope I can be Gene Wolfe when I grow up. And this story really shows that off in a thing you can read in one sitting. And it's just also really damn cool. It's just great. If you've never read Gene Wolfe, read that, or if you want to read something longer, read Fifth Head of Cerberus. You don't have to commit to Book of the New Sun. Book of the New Sun is the greatest science fiction series ever, but you don't have to commit to it, it's fine. You read something smaller first. Trip Trap is awesome.
So your main character, Hadrian, as he progresses, he is a completely different person. Not completely different, but he's definitely changed. Did the plans that you have for him in the beginning, like did you create him as you wrote, or did you have plans for him, for what's happening to him later on in the books?
So yeah, like yes and no, right? And this is kind of true of everything in the story, right? Because the series is really long, 7 books, and they're all like 250,000 words long. It's the same so I knew where I was going. Like I know what the ending is because I like tease it on the first page of every one, right? But I don't know 100% of what that looks like, right? I know where I'm going, and I know what's going to happen, but I don't know necessarily all the context or every piece of everything. And I don't know like how every character is going to feel in every given moment, right? You come to a lot of that stuff in the moment, right? As long as you stay true to what you've set up, right? It's okay to discover things along the way. So I knew that Hadrian was going to change, and I knew that he was going to do these things. But discovering like who he would be as we went was mostly a process of being in the moment. When I outline, it's mostly about plot because it's plot that I have a hard time keeping track of. Who people are, in terms of character building and things like that, is something that's a lot easier for me to just do. And so I don't track that unless I need to track something like a motivation. If there's something that's like under the surface that I want to make sure I'm signaling in some way, I might need a note to make sure that I don't forget about something that's as small as something detail. But in terms of like, how is he going to act, at this point or that point, I don't necessarily know. Now, the place this isn't true is the books have these, generally speaking, have these big time jumps between them. And so when I start each book, I'm like, okay, it's been this long, he's been through this stuff, he's this much older, who is he now? Because, none of us is the same person year to year, right? Now, it's like not obvious to us because we see ourselves in the mirror every day, but like you go look at a picture of yourself from middle school, you're like, I hate this kid, why are you like this? Why did I say this thing, right? With character, it's a lot easier because it's all sort of out there in front of you. So when I get to the new book, I sort of think about where the dials are on who Hadrian is and his personality, and not all the characters really, but because it's all from his point of view, he's the most important one for this to be true. So I think of him as like a new character every book, right? It's like, oh, in this book he finally figured out this, right? But he has this new problem. and like he's a lot grouchier now, you know, whatever, right? Sort of that'll be like a starting each book as itself kind of thing. But that's sort of all done really in writing chapter one, but in laying out the outline.
So that's actually part of another question that I wanted to ask you. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
100% a plotter. The first book, I didn't have a process. I kind of just wrote it. I was in college. And like all college students, I was going to live forever, and I had to fit it. Which was wrong, it turns out. And then thing about getting a publishing contract is that they then expect you to turn in the next book, in a reasonable amount of time. Some authors accept it. I'm not wealthy enough to be an exception, so we're selling other books. So I needed to turn another book in a year, and I didn't know how to do that. So I had to help. And I had the benefit of working as editor for Banned Books still, and we just had other authors' outlines lying around the office. And so I was like, how do you do this? So I borrowed one of David Drake's old outlines. And I took it home and I like looked at how Dave did it, rest in peace, and sort of reverse engineered my outlining process by looking at one of Dave's over the weekend. And Dave was a very thorough outliner. His books are maybe 100,000 words, and the outlines were maybe a third that length. Which was very rigorous. My books are 250,000 words. My outlines could be about 50,000 words, but that's proportionately not nearly as rigorous as Dave was. But Dave was so good; he was a genius. But ever since then, I've outlined everything. I outline short stories, and I found that like most of my writer's block is the result simply from, and this is like such because I don't know what I'm going to write about, but I don't like literally know like what the action on the page is going to be, and if I know what the action is. I know what's happening in the scene physically, like where are we, what are we trying to do, what needs to happen by the end of the scene, right, just physically. Then everything else just happens. Like I don't need to worry about character motivation, because like that's obvious to me, right? It's like where are we and why, right, and what's happening. That's the stuff I struggle with, and that's the stuff I find is easiest to outline, because it's not that deep in a sense, right? It's not thoughts and feelings, it's just they have a fight, and then this guy wins, and they leave, right? That's really relatively easy now. So, I'll outline the sort of plot, and then or I'll outline world building too. Almost all of my world building in my novel outlines about 7 points.
Most of the science fiction and fantasy that have book sizes that are similar to yours are like third person with multiple points of view.
Yes.
Yours is in the first person, and that seems really challenging. But you seem to have tackled that on. Is that just more your style, or like Hadrian's story just kind of pulled you in that way? Like, do you think maybe for your next series you're gonna do something totally different? Like, how do you have a thought on that?
Well, the next thing will definitely be different. So my big anxiety is not that this has been hard, is that my anxiety is that this is the only thing I can do. Now I've written some third person stuff, I've done 2 novellas in first person, people seem to like those, okay. I've done some short stories. I've never done a multiple POV thing, that's never happened. And so it'll be interesting to sort of branch out. My fear is that Hadrian's voice is just my voice, and that for the rest of my career after this, people are like, "It's just Hadrian, one trick," which we'll see, right? I think I'll be fine, but like, who knows? But it is a weird choice for a really long series of things to do it this way. My beta reader is yelling at me about this at the moment because I'm writing a battle, and the thing about writing a battle with one point of view character is you see the whole thing through a keyhole, and that was annoying. I'm like, sorry, we're stuck with it. Figure something out. But it faces, gives you challenges as a writer to write this way. But so does everything, right? If you have too many point of view characters, you know, you might end up underserving some of them, or maybe you end up moving one out of a book entirely into the next one, and people being like, "Where's Tyrion?" Book 4 is making me sad. Just kidding, book 4 is pretty good, but like I miss Tyrion. You know, so there are problems to like every choice, right? You know, and you just have to figure out what you want to do with those limitations, and how you address those limitations is where the creativity is, right? Limitations are good, actually, creatively. Thinking outside of the box is, I don't want to say, like that's like, it's like the rookie move, right? Thinking inside the box in the coolest way possible is actually a lot harder, and the results could be, I think, a lot more impressive. You know, working within limitations is often where the best solutions come from. Remember with classic Doctor Who in like the 70s, they took the sonic screwdriver away because they were just using it to fix every problem all the time. And they're like, it's gone now. Good luck, writers. You know, and they didn't bring it back for, I think, more than a decade, right? Because it had just become a magic wand. And this is true not just of like narrative style, but like of world building choices, right? You know, it's very easy to just say, oh, and then that problem wasn't a problem, right? Because we invented the unproblem device. But if you just deal with the problem, you know, then you suddenly have this thing of like, oh, like this author actually thought through the implications of an inertial dampener. Like science fiction authors usually just like, oh, it's fine, I guess. It's not scary. That's why I like Alistair Reynolds so much. He's much smarter than me. You know, thinks about all these science questions. He has answers to science questions I didn't even know to ask. You know, but yeah.
Was choosing first person for Hadrian back in the beginning, was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, but not for any literary reason. I'd written third person. I was planning to do multiple point of views. And I've been doing that for years and years and years and years. And I got to this point in college where I'm like, I need to get serious about doing this. I need to like wipe the slate clean. And I need to like really commit to this being the time. So I need to make some changes so that this is a new project in my head, even though it was like the same world, the same basic story, right? I need to think about this differently. And the big change I made was going to first person, just so that it was like a new creation in a sense, right? To sort of tell myself this was serious, this was for real this time. So I did that. I changed a bunch of names kind of arbitrarily. I was fine with the names I had, but I was like, this is not the same thing as Novelist, right? So I did that. I changed to first person. I changed the title I'd had for years. I got rid of, I don't remember even what it was. And I made a lot of superficial changes, and then that one really serious structural committed change. And that ended up being what stuck. That wasn't at the time for any deeper reason. It was just for me.
What were some of your inspirations for the character of Hadrian?
Within science fiction, I was talking to Tristan about this, if he's here. There he is, right in the front, sorry. Paul Atreides, obviously, to a certain extent. You know, there's a lot, the series is very much in conversation with Dune, right? But it's in conversation with Dune in the sense that, like, while I love Dune, I have never believed Frank Herbert's thesis about heroes. Frank Herbert's like, heroes are bad. I'm like, okay, if some of them, maybe. But like, what about the heroes to stop the ones that are bad, right? Because when he talks about the dangers of charismatic leaders, he means Hitler, right? Let's not, you know, he says Hitler in book 2, like, notice who he's talking about. Paul is one, he's not Hitler. Like, nothing in the book communicates that he's Hitler. In book 2, he's like, trust me. When he talks about charismatic leaders, is Churchill not charismatic, right? Was Roosevelt not? Was Patton not? We kind of needed those guys, in part to deal with Hitler, right? Like, it's too simple to say heroes are simply bad, right? In the same way that it's too simple to say heroes are simply good, right? It was like Frank is, criticizing science fiction of the pulp era, specifically stuff like Princess of Mars, which is also awesome, right? But Paul is sort of an anti-John Carter, right? And in the same way that Luke Skywalker is sort of a post critique, right? John Carter. It's like go back to the original hero formula, right? I wanted to say, I hear you, Frank, heroes, may have some problems, right? But also maybe we still need heroes. So it's like, if you could think of John Carter's like Gen 1, heroes are good, right? Paul's Gen 2, heroes are bad. I wanted to be like Gen 3, heroes are complicated.
Yes.
But then there's also, there's some T.E. Lawrence in him because Lawrence of Arabia is my favorite movie and I think about it all the time. And there's some Lord Byron in him for the same reason. Lord Byron is awesome. And I think about him all the time. Those are probably like the big components. But there's little things. For example, I love Mervyn Peake. I love Golden Guest. Hadrian's name was suggested to me by the fact that Titus is also a Roman emperor, the main character in his books, and they both have purple eyes. It was just a little thank you to Mervyn Peake for what he's given me. So there's a little bit there, but it's not that deep. There's no thematic real connection between Hadrian and Titus, except that I like them, and the Roman name thing. So there are probably some smaller things, but those are sort of maybe the big deals.
You recently got to take a stab at writing some sword and sorcery. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And
Yeah.
would you like to do a bit more of that?
I will be doing more of it. I'm going to write at least 3 more short stories with that character this year for my Patreon. And they'll show up somewhere else. I have plans. I've done 2 stories with this character. His name's Adaman. And the first one's called The Barrow King. It is in Galaxy Magazine, which is at galaxysf.com. And it is, that story about him fighting like a Barrow Wight, basically. But there's a twist to it. We'll see if you read it, see what it is. I love sword and sorcery. I love fantasy. Obviously, I said it's my first love, right? And to sort of go back to that, it's I sort of hate to do the thing where it's like this, but this, right? They slap me with this marketing line. It's like doing these things to win. And when that works for somebody, that's awesome. And there are also people who just hate that marketing tactic, so I try to stay away from it. But it's like it's sort of like Aragorn and if written by Fritz Leiber.
Nice.
Sort of what I'm going for. But by way of 90s anime. Hope people like it. There's a second story that's coming out later this year in a book called Swords and Larceny, which is being edited by my friend David F. Sherrod from Bain. And it's like all fantasy heist stories, so it's a heist story in this new setting I'm working on. It's a fantasy setting, but it's kind of like a old school weird fantasy setting. It's more Elric than Middle Earth. There's weird technology and stuff. It's not just the Middle Ages by a different name. I'm very excited about that. Yeah.
So, if you had carte blanche to write in anybody else's playground or sandbox, what would it be?
It'll be Middle Earth. That would never happen, right? And I honestly probably should say no, right? I don't know if it's anybody's best interest to try. So I've been asked to do a few before, and I've always said no, because I have this sense that the most useful thing that I can do, or really I think that anybody who wants to write can do, is to build your own thing. Especially if it's like these big properties, if it's Star Wars or Warhammer or something like that, right? The way they pay you is at once. You get paid up front, you get paid work for hire, and then you're done, right? So if any book I would write for them, I would get paid for once, and if I write my own stuff, I get paid for every time a book sells. And so that makes more sense. But I also built something of my own that I get to keep, right? And there's no amount of writing for Star Wars that's going to make Star Wars mine, right? And I've seen a lot of writers who do stuff like this, have their own stuff and their Star Wars stuff, and only the Star Wars stuff sells. And they seem cool, with it, but I don't want that to be me. So I said no to stuff that 10-year-old me would have said yes to. But it'd be really hard to say no to Tolkien's estate. It'd be really hard to say. For sure.
Have you ever had a moment in your series where your creativity just really surprised you? Something just came whiffling out of your imagination
Yeah. Usually what happens is I realize I've made a mistake, more than anything. But, I talked a lot about outlining, but sometimes I'll get to a place and there'll just be a better idea that'll happen in the moment. Because when I think about outlining, I think about the whole process as in terms of like increasing levels of resolution, right? And so in a sense, the outline is the first draft, right? I think the whole plotter planner thing is plotter pantser thing is kind of a false dichotomy, right? Because like I'm discovering when I'm outlining, right? But like when you get to the higher levels of resolution, you realize like that outline wasn't good enough. You like missed something, and missing something will either give you a new idea or present a problem that you didn't notice up, at 500 feet. And being in the situation will cause problems, and then that's when like you're really in the box and you have to get really creative. I had this problem with book 3. I'll try to be vague in case people haven't read book 3, but that's ways in. But there's a bit where Hadrian is in, let's say, legal trouble, and also the law is trying to kill him just because they don't like him anyway. So he's being closed in with red tape, and also they're just trying to kill him. But the problem was that I had forgotten that the law existed in the story at all that I'm writing. And then I'm like, oh, I forgot about the chantry completely at this part of the story. I just haven't put it there. There's a whole bit in the middle where he's tried by the Inquisition and checked up on, just wasn't in the story. And I was sitting there writing, and I'm like, oh no, I forgot this whole part of my world building. And I need to address it. And I need to come up with a solution. And I have about 3 chapters in which to do it, because the book is already going to be really long. So we need to figure out how to do that effectively and like move on, right? And it's very frustrating in the moment, but being able to sort of like Looney Tunes, like characters in the cloud punch your way out of it, is very satisfying for me. I think it's not quite the situation that you're talking about, but every now and then, like something like that will happen where it's just not in the plan at all, and that's the part of the book I end up being happiest with, or that readers end up being happiest with. Is something that you didn't really plan on, or that was a problem. Could be really fun. But also too, like this isn't precisely like being surprised by something that isn't planned, but something you could be not sure about could be maybe the first thing you hear somebody really liked, or something like oh, like I wasn't so sure, and like I'm glad that paid off, or something like that. Because I find that I'm a very poor judge of my own work. Every book I get about 60% and I'm like, this is the worst book I've ever written and I should quit. And my wife's like, that's funny, you say that literally every time. Please stop. Can you just finish it and then shut up? And so it's only really when other people tell me what they liked or that they liked that I can really see clearly about it.
If you do you write for fun anymore?
It's awesome. Yeah, no, I have okay, so like I was who did I talk to with my wife? I can't remember. I was with my wife, we were talking to a friend of hers, I think. And I said, and I love my job. She's like, you do not. You hate it. You whine about it constantly. Like you don't understand, all right? It's like I love playing a video game that I'm bad at, right? And like, oh, I just died 100th time playing Elden Ring. Like it's fun. Shut up, actually. You don't understand. I mean, I used to box for fun. I got hit in the face, right? So like my sense of what's fun is perhaps a little bit confused. But like I barely read, actually. Like given the choice between working on my own stuff or reading something else, like I choose my own stuff every time. Like I would so much rather write. I mean, even play video games, right? Like I love my job, and I'm very blessed to be in a place where I get to do this for a living. Very grateful to my readers for that. My wife was able to quit her job last year, which is amazing. Very few writers get to not just support themselves on writing, but like the whole family. I feel very blessed. for that to be my job, it's, oh my gosh, it's so cool, you know? So no, I still, you know, complain about deadlines, but never about the fact that I get to write it. No, it's not fun.
Do you write stories or invent stories for your kid?
Not yet. We're gonna. Working on it. But right now, you know, sort of more. She's more on the like Mama Red Pajama level. I don't know that I can quite. That's like a skill. It's like a completely alien like skill set, right? But like middle grade, maybe. You know, we'll see. We'll see. Got some ideas. You know, if it. You look at all the toys, right? Like A. Milne did. You're like, oh, hold on a second. Like, there's a giant snail. And I'm like, there's something here. No, I don't know. Something here. This giant snail. I gotta. We'll see. But I don't think anybody's expecting a children's book about a giant snail from me yet. So I gotta. You don't wanna pivot too hard as a writer. I think sci-fi and fantasy is one thing, but like sci-fi, like very for grown-up sci-fi to kids book, giant snail, that's like your favorite metal band putting out a jazz album. You're like, what the hell is this? You delayed the next Sun Eater book for this? I don't care.
Any questions? Go ahead.
How have you balanced parenthood and writing?
Not
How's-
well. Not well. Mostly by getting up earlier and earlier in order to write. We're also expecting another kid. And so my wife needs me around, needs help. So I probably write like maybe 4 hours a day right now, which is not as much as I would like to. And for the next couple of weeks, till this book is done, it's not as much as I need to. But that's okay. You know, we'll figure it out. We will see. But like, you know, given a choice between time with my kid or writing, I'll choose my kid every time. It's not even hard. My wife gets on me for it though. She's like, you know I'm gonna get her. It's gonna be fine. Why do you come downstairs? I'm like, why wouldn't you? Like, what are you talking about? This is way better. So, yeah, you know, but it's okay. The thing about writing, at least, you know, now that people are reading the books, is that the money doesn't come in on a daily basis based on like how much it doesn't come in on a daily basis, right? It comes in every like 6 months. So, you know, if I write, you know, 10% slower, probably fine, you know. So, which is cool. You know, my kid gets both of her parents in the house, like every day. Like, man, that doesn't happen often. So I feel very grateful. Hand over here somewhere.
Do you have an idea file?
In here somewhere. Yeah. I got no shortage of plans. My publisher is talking about a trilogy next. They want it to be like a new thing, not Sun Eater, not science fiction even. They want to do a fantasy thing. And I've got like 4 options. So I don't want to say what they are in case people will get really attached to one and then mad when I pick a different one. But like we'll see. But no shortage of plans. It's just I hope I'll get to do them all eventually. One of these days.
Yeah, you said you sold Sun Eater, I forget, 2016, 2018, somewhere in that time.
Yeah, January 2016. Came out in 2018.
Okay, so certainly around that time, you know, independent publishing on Kindle was not new. It's certainly been around for several years.
Yeah.
Lots of authors choose to go that route. Did you consider that at all, or you were determined to go old school and like shop it to one of the major publishing houses?
Yeah, meaning no disrespect to indie writers at all. I admire them very much. I've done some indie publishing by novellas, right? I never even thought about it. I wanted to do traditional publishing. I didn't have like a clear thesis for why. It's just like that's what I want. That's what we're doing. Period. Done. Right. And that was always the plan. I think, frankly, it might have been laziness. It might have just been I don't want to figure out like where am I gonna find a page designer, right? I think it might have just been that. It might have just been this is easier in my head. It's easier to bang my head against agent mailboxes until one of them broke, where I did, then figure out all the little pieces that are moving. Because I will say, I figured all this stuff out to do Fine Press Edition for a Kickstarter, and that was a nightmare, actually, right? Not just like dealing with page design, and cover art and all that stuff. Cover art's super fun to do, actually. My favorite part of the whole process is getting art, because I actually can't see things in my head. And so when I get pictures, it's like, how did you get this? This is awesome. It's very fun. But dealing with like supply issues, this is a real story. But for my Fine Press edition, which there's one in the charity auction, by the way, I had like 20 left. They're the spare copies from the Kickstarter. I brought one for the charity auction if you want to put a bid in for the animals. We used the same paper that Brandon Sanderson ended up using for his Kickstarter, and he used all of it in the world. And so we had our order in first, but they did not care because we were not 500,000 copies or however many. I don't know. This is for like the big, was it Way of Kings or Words Readings, the one he just did? I can't remember. The really big one, and I had to wait for more paper to physically exist. That was annoying, right? So like there were all sorts of like little like material business hurdles like that, and I think just like figuring out stuff like that is like more daunting to me than writing a book or anything. Like if I have to, like I'm one of those people, like if I have to like make a doctor's appointment, like I have to like on separate days look up the number and call. Like I just like I really don't want to do it, really don't want to go. And so I have to like stretch those things out. So I think I think really I avoided the indie stuff for a long time because I didn't want to have to figure all that stuff out. I've since done that. But I also, when I indie published the novellas, I did them quite poorly initially, and I have since been improving the situation because I just didn't know what I was doing. It has been a process. Yeah, never really thought about it. But more power to people who do, right? Like I'm friends with Brian Cage. I have reason to envy him. Like there are things about doing it that way that are clearly better, like inarguably better, right? But I also have this sense that like this is not novel, right? But like I think of my audience in terms of concentric circles, right? With like my like really committed fans here, right? But the largest cloud is like people that include like my mother's friends who like maybe read one book a year, and like those people only read books when they go into Barnes and Noble. And like if I want to get those people, I need to be traditional published, right? So like I think the like maximum potential growth you still need traditional publishing. Even if you can be like, I mean like Hugh Howey owns a yacht, right? Like I think like I still think traditional publishing is the shortest path to greatness. Maybe I'm wrong. But.
Can you talk about the first time you went into a bookstore and saw one of your books?
I don't know if I can remember the precise first. Because I think the first time I went in to look, it wasn't there. Which is also like super normal. What I can, we talked about this a little bit, is because I worked for Bain for so long, whenever I go into a section, it's like, I know that guy, hate that guy, right? That guy made my job really hard, and so it is a little bit like, that's fun, right? But mostly, like, I go into Barnes and Noble this all the time, right? When I'm on a road trip, I like try to use them as stops. Pro tip, they're usually cleaner than gas stations. And there are books. But I'll go in and I'll sign books there because then I get to meet the booksellers and then like hopefully they will stock my books. Like it's fun to like see what books are where and if they were there and to figure out like, because sometimes the bookstores don't care about science fiction and stuff like that. But as far as a single moment, I don't really remember because it might have been when I like had a sign. There's a really good bookstore in Raleigh, Quailbridge Books. That has been there for the long. I think it started in the 50s, and it moved around a couple times, but like they've been there a really long time. And so when I had the book come out, I went and I talked to them a couple months ago, like, can I do it in like here? My uncle had actually done some of their, he's an industrial artist, so he like did some of their interior design and stuff. So they like me, right? So I think I went in for that, right? And it was really cool because I had like 80 people there, but it was like my family and like school teachers, and I was like, this is a huge event, and then like, it doesn't really count though. And so like I'm always like sort of undercutting these things. But it's cool now because like most of my family doesn't come anymore. My parents do, my brothers do, my in-laws do, but like my aunts and uncles, like they have something else going on. And you know, seventh book is way less impressive to friends and family than first book. But now it's mostly like readers, which is better, right? Actually, right? As cool as it is to have like a big family reunion. I felt really bad. I don't know if Carrie's here, but Carrie was at my first. He's here. He mentioned something. He was at the first signing. He was like him, and then like everybody else knew me. And I was like, sorry, bro. Thanks for being here, though. So I actually had one person, right? But like, so the time I saw my books was like, I knew they were.
When did you feel like, or do you feel that you have made it, that you are the successful writer that you set out to be?
It was last month. It was last month. I went to Dragon Steel. I went to Brandon Sanders's convention. I had not been to a big convention in 3 years. I think the last one I went to FanX in Salt Lake in 2021. And that I did terribly. I sold maybe 20 books in the whole weekend. It's so gutting, right? You just stand there, for 3 days, and like everybody like is like, don't look at him. We gotta get to Hayden Christensen. Don't look at him. They'll try to sell you something, right? And so that was rough. But I went to Dragon Steel, and I had a line for 5 hours the first day, which was way more than I expected. So that was really cool. And I ran out of books. I ran out of book one at least the morning of the second day. And I had to apologize to everybody. I was like, man, I like knew that I would be able to sell more books, but like, I wasn't. So it was very cool. Because I just like hadn't been out, in a while. So it took a minute, get more emails, right? But those are emails. Like, it doesn't feel real in a way, But it's hard to argue with like actual people.
5 hours.
It was a lot. They weren't like all lined up at once. Like, it was just like there was enough people in the line permanently. Like, it was hard. I didn't eat until like 3 p.m. It was awesome. Not eating. It's cool.
We're almost out of time. Any other questions?
Aliens. So I know Hadrian's point of view on the Cielson throughout the series.
Yeah.
I just wondered your perspective on, like, is that some of your opinion on aliens, or is that just kind of more
Well,
the character?
so as far as we know, there are no aliens to really have an opinion on, right?
Right.
Like, I was waiting. I didn't get to say this on the chapter, the No Chapel on the Enterprise panel last time, but I was waiting to point out that we actually have as much solid evidence for aliens as God. So everybody who's yelling, please shut up. But it would really depend on like what aliens we're talking about, right? Like the Cielson are not great; they're not good neighbors, right? So like I would have negative feelings about them, right? But like if it's cool aliens, like that's cool, right? But like we gotta take things as we find it, right? I honestly suspect that we're not gonna find anything in a long time, and if we do, it'll be protoplasm, right? And my opinions on protoplasms are: will they make me sick? If yes, delete. So yeah, I don't know. But we'll see how they are, right? If we get there and they're like, we're gonna take your heart out, I'm like, ooh, we have a problem. All right, we'll see. Hopefully we get along with them. Yeah.
All right then. I know they're getting ready for the next one. We'll finish up. Can you tell us where you will be
Yeah.
for the rest of today?
Yeah, so mostly I'll be at my table, which is right by the doors to the dealer room, right down there. I got plenty of books if you want to come grab some. But I also will probably hang around for a little bit of the road show here. I did used to work for Bain. Jason said I didn't have to be here, but I'll at least say hi to everyone. But then I will also be at the Play Your Strengths panel at 5 p.m. across the hall. So 5 to 6 I'll be in there.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to me. Thanks.